Good morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Hope yours is going well and hope yours will continue to go well. We're to the end of another work week, and we are going to continue on with looking into the not too distant future of the Seattle Seahawks when, after the 2022 season, it comes time to put the final pieces together to make 2023 a good season. Because let's face it, this roster right now, from where we sit, has some significant holes. And we may be able to overcome those holes to win some games in 2022. We might even be able to surprise people and win more than we lose, make the playoffs, I guess. It's certainly possible. Teams overcome holes in their roster all the time. But I don't think anybody, as of right now, any realistic person is looking at this team and thinking, we're winning the Super Bowl in 2022. So I can't help but look to 2023 to try to find what we can do to improve our team's roster enough to make 2023 that kind of season. So we've gone through a few positions already. Today we're looking at defensive end. And let me qualify things here. When I say defensive end, I am thinking about it from the context of a 3-4 defense. Because supposedly that is what we are going to start transitioning towards, a hybrid defense. And when you're running a hybrid defense, generally speaking, I think it's much easier to go from 3-4 personnel, occasionally doing 4-3 stuff, to 4-3 personnel, occasionally doing 3-4 stuff. So when I'm looking for defensive ends, I'm thinking about 3-4 ends, which we've talked about this before, but 3-4 ends, they're bigger, they're stronger, they're more focused on eating up space and eating up blockers than going after their own numbers. And traditionally, it's a much less star-studded crop. Those guys on the defensive line in the 3-4 tend to not get a ton of attention at the NFL. You don't see fans talking up how great this 3-4 defensive end is all that often. So not only can not every defensive line player pull off 3-4 D end, some of them don't want to because you don't get the accolades, you don't get the respect, and quite often you don't get the money. Pass rushers are the guys who are getting big bucks typically on defense right now, and now it's starting to turn into cornerback as well. But you typically don't see 3-4 ends break the bank. Very, very few do. Nevertheless, we need to find some people who can do it and are willing to do it. But keep those two things in mind. So, looking at the current roster, guys who you look at right now and think that guy either will be or might be a 3-4 end, you've got 6 guys. The first two are the 2 guys who are actually under contract in 2023. So you got Shelby Harris and Quentin Jefferson. Now, Shelby Harris is due $9 million next year, but he's due nothing if you cut him because he was a trade. So his guarantees are taken by the Broncos. Now, I don't think we're going to cut or release Shelby Harris because he's still really good and he's proven he can be really good in a 3-4 scheme. He's a 3-4 end. I don't want to say exclusively because when you look at 3-4 ends, you typically come to the conclusion that they can either play 5 tech or 3 tech in a 4-3, and that's probably the case for Shelby Harris as well. But I don't think we have to worry too much about that. He's good. He's had a good career. He should continue to be effective. I think you are probably looking at Shelby Harris playing out the rest of his contract in Seattle. Quentin Jefferson, on the other hand, I'm less sure about. His contract expires next year. He's due 6 million more or less in 2023. Only 2 million if you cut him though. So it would not shock me if Quentin Jefferson, unless he has a good season, is let go after 2022, and we just owe him the 2 million. Everyone else who is a candidate for 3-4 end, in my estimation, they are coming off the books next year. Poona Ford, free agent, Collier, free agent, and then Gerard Hewitt and Miles Adams. Now, those guys are practice squatters for the most part. Not a big deal, but they are free agents next year regardless. So, Poona Ford, we could keep him around. It depends on what he does this year in this role. We know he can be a nasty one tech. He tried to do 3-tech last year and it was mixed, but he still played well. He just didn't impact the game in the ways we needed him to at 3-tech. So, depending on what we see from him this year, we may or may not bring him back. LJ Collier, he's got to be done at this point, if he's even on the team in a few months. I can't imagine him being brought back. There were many opportunities for him to get on the field last year, and he barely did. And Hewitt and Adams are they're probably career practice squatters. I don't see much upside there. So you might bring them back, but they're not filling any holes. They're not addressing any needs. So looking at the current roster, Shelby Harris is good, but he's probably only going to be here for another 2 years. Quentin Jefferson is a decent stopgap, but he's not a stud. He doesn't have stud potential. Poona Ford's kind of the wild card here. We need to see if he can do it or not. But other than that, not a lot. So we're going to have a need here. Next offseason, we're going to be looking at Shelby Harris, probably 1 year left, and then I don't think we're going to bring him back because at that point he's going to be 32, 33, and we'll make a determination on Poona. But even if Shelby Harris and Poona Ford are your answers in 2023, you need depth behind them. Maybe Quentin Jefferson can be that depth, but maybe not. And you don't really have anyone else to be the other backup. So either way, you're going to need to do something, and you may need to do a big something. It's possible Poona and Quentin Jefferson don't work out, and you're left with Shelby Harris and nothing. So let's take a look at some of the guys you could go get. I tried to be pretty comprehensive here, but one thing to remember is it's hard to know who's going to be able to do certain things and who's going to be willing to do certain things, right? Like, looking at a player who plays in a 4-3, sometimes it's hard to tell if they can do 3-4 stuff. And beyond even that, it's hard to tell if they would be willing to, because those guys get less stats, less accolades, less attention, and eventually, when it's time for them to renegotiate a new contract, because of all these things, they usually get less money. But nevertheless, let's take a look here. A lot of these guys have done 3-4 stuff before, and the ones who haven't, they fit the mold that you would typically expect from that position. First guy is probably the crown jewel of the upcoming free agency class at this position, Stephon Tuitt of the Steelers. He is coming off a career year, and if he has another year similar to what he did last year, then going into his 30, he'll be 30 when he takes the field for whatever team picks up a deal with him in 2023. He will probably be demanding top-of-the-line money for a 3-4 end. And remember, this is a guy who plays 3-4 end for Pittsburgh. So he knows he's proven he can do it, and he can do it at a very high level. I think you were looking at like 3 years, $50 million. This is a bank-breaking kind of contract. I don't know if you're going to do this when you already have a guy like Shelby Harris making $9 million for the last year, but it's probably what it would take. And Tuitt's play over the last, well, I would specifically highlight this most recent season, but honestly, he's been a good player for a while now. It's just he really broke out last year. So Tuitt's probably the top dog. Javon Hargrave would be my next guy. He's originally a Steeler, but he's been an Eagle. He's also going to be turning 30 next year. I think you could probably give him 3 years, $45 million, kind of close to what Philly gave him. I think that they gave him like 3 years, $39, and he's been successful there. He's been good. He made a Pro Bowl last year. If he has another good season, then I think you're looking at another pretty big payday. He actually played nose tackle for the Steelers, a rare undersized nose tackle, but he should be able to do 3-4 end stuff as well. Matthew Ioannidis, formerly of Washington, he, I believe, signed with Carolina this most recent offseason, kind of a 1-year prove-it deal. And if he does manage to successfully prove it in Carolina, he'll be hitting the market in 2023 at 29 years old. He played some 3-4 before, so he has some experience doing 3-4 end. And if he plays at the level that he's established he can play at, you are probably looking at something like 3 years, $36 million. The cap is going up, and we've seen some players prove that they can earn those 8-figure contracts at defensive end in a 3-4. Like Ogba got like what, $9 million a year. Tuitt's previous contract signed several years ago was 5 years, $60 million, I think. So you are seeing some of these guys start to demand those big bucks. So I think Ioannidis is another guy who's going to be getting that 10 to 12, maybe even a little bit more million a year, despite playing a position of less acclaim. David Onyemata of, I believe, the Saints, going to be turning 30 next year. I think he's in line for a similar contract to Ioannidis. It's, again, all these contract estimates are heavily dependent on what these guys do next year. But Onyemata would be one of the guys near the top of my list. He's proven that he's a quality player. I say 3 years, 36 million. Same for Ioannidis. So he's got to be on the list. Now moving down in the ranks a little bit, moving down to guys who are a little less accomplished and probably going to be a decent less amount cheaper. We got Sheldon Rankins. He's going to be 29 next year. He doesn't put up the big numbers like some of the above guys. I think you're looking at something more like 2 years, 15, based off his previous contracts. So that's something if you want to go a little bit cheaper, which is reasonable, and is a position you can go a little bit cheaper in a 3-4. Although I would say you probably want to have at least one stud on that defensive line at some position. Taven Bryan, this is like the reclamation project. This was a first round pick by Jacksonville. He didn't work out. He's currently, I think he's spending 1 year in like Cleveland. I've been looking at so many different players lately, I forget, but he'll be 27 next year, so he's still got some years in front of him. And because he's a reclamation project, unless he blows up this year, you can probably get him for like 1 year, 5 million, maybe even less. This guy does not have a whole lot of stuff to hang his hat on other than his first round pedigree. So this is a guy you could pick up if you're trying to like find some value out of a guy that the league has mostly moved on from. Of course, he could undo all this by having a big year in 2022, but not terribly likely. Adam Butler would be the next name, 29 years old, another slightly cheaper guy, 2 years, 9 million was what I estimate. He's had some good seasons for, I believe, the Dolphins and the Patriots, and he's done 3-4 stuff before. So he has a little bit of experience doing that kind of stuff. He's not a great player, but he's perfectly adequate. Next name is going to be Jerry Tillery, coming off his rookie contract with the Chargers. Chargers are spending money like crazy, so they may not have enough money to keep Tillery around. And Tillery's been a pretty effective player for them. And looking at his body type and his play style, I feel like he could do 3-4 stuff. But he's going to cost you because he's young and because he's been productive. I say 3 years, 45 million. So that's another one of the guys that you would get only if you're willing to make a big expenditure on that defensive line, which you can do. But if you're going to do that, you have to realize you're going to be giving something back somewhere else. But I am not opposed to it. Tyquan Lewis, 28 years old, little bit cheaper, but still, he's an accomplished player who has had good seasons, done some good things in the NFL. I estimate 2 years, 18 million, reasonable, but not huge. Chris Wormley, 29 years old, 33 years and 36 million. Another guy who has done enough in the NFL and put up good enough numbers and been considered a good enough player to be a top free agent target at the position. I think he can do the 3-4 stuff. But again, you're looking at a decent chunk of change to bring him in. And these last two guys are also kind of, I don't even know if you can call them reclamation projects because they were never, to my knowledge, considered to be anything special anyway. Like Taven Bryan was at least a first round pick, but Hassan Ridgeway, going to turn 28 next year. He hasn't been anything special so far in his career. You could probably get him for cheap. And look, if you bring back Shelby Harris and you bring back Poona Ford and you keep Quentin Jefferson, then you only need a backup anyway at that point, right? If you believe that Shelby and Poona are good starters and Quentin Jefferson is good depth, then you only need another guy who is going to be good depth. So a guy like Hassan Ridgeway at 3 million or Christian Covington for 2 million, I wouldn't have a big problem with that. They're certainly limited in the upside category, but if you decide you are comfortable moving forward with some of these guys you already have in place, then I think that getting somebody like a Ridgeway, a Covington, or a Taven Bryan, or an Adam Butler is well within reason. You don't need to spend big at every position. And to a certain extent, you already are paying decent money to Shelby Harris, and you probably will have to give a pretty decent contract to Poona Ford as well if you want to keep him around. So I'm open to a lot of different paths here, but a lot of this is going to be determined by what actually happens on the field in 2022 and how the team feels going forward. Okay, last up, we're going to do the draft, and I found a collection of guys who, based off their body type and play style, my initial impression is they could potentially do 3-4N stuff. And again, I want to stress this. If we're doing hybrid, which it seems like we are, the 3-4Ns kind of move to 3 tech or 5 tech most of the time, depending on what alignment you're in. So there should be plenty of potential for these guys to at least do those things. So even if we're not doing a ton of 3-4, it still checks out. There's one top dog on this list, one guy who I look at and go, that guy might be a good candidate for a 3-4N position. It's Brian Bresee from Clemson. Going to be 21 years old next year. So still very young, still has a lot of upside to grow into. He's 6'5", 290 pounds. You are probably looking at a top 10 pick. You probably are, as of right now. Now, that can change. But as of right now, my indicators are that he's going to be a higher first-round pick. We've got Byron Young from Alabama, 6'3", 292 pounds. Currently projects to be a second-rounder. By the way, you may notice some recurring themes with a lot of these guys that I looked at here. They play for one of two particular schools. We got Tyler Davis, 6'2", 300 pounds, second-rounder as well. Zach Harrison, Ohio State. I did actually find his age. Sometimes it's hard to find these guys' age, by the way. 22, 6'6", so very tall, 272 pounds, little light, but he could potentially gain some weight. He could grow a little bit into his frame because he certainly has the frame to add a little bit of weight. Third rounder, Justin Ibogi from Alabama, 6'5", 292 pounds, third rounder. All these guys, I just look at their body type, I look at their frame, and they just kind of speak to me as potential 3-4Ns. By the way, four of those five top guys, who I all think are, as of right now, likely to go in the top 100, they're all either Alabama or Clemson, and then Zach Harrison's OSU. So that's how they do things over there. Kajayla Cansey from Pittsburgh, only 6 feet tall, which is a little bit of issue maybe, but 275, currently projects to be a fourth rounder. Tyler Batty from BYU, 6'5", 275 pounds, fourth round grade. Fabian Lovett from Florida State, 6'4", 306 pounds, fourth round grade. DJ Dale from Alabama, another Alabama, 6'3", 300 pounds, fourth rounder. And finally, Akeem Mesidor, Miami guy. I have my eye on, 6'2", 272 pounds, fifth round grade. Those are the guys I'm looking at right now. Again, a lot of these guys, they have so much to show us, one way or the other. It seems pointless to deep dive into them beyond the very cursory stuff, because what they do in 2022 on the football field is going to determine their value ultimately. Some of these guys haven't even played that much football yet. We're just going based off, well, I can see what they do. I can see how big they are. Therefore, I project this. But we're going to learn more about them this year. These are the guys I would keep my eye on. And that's all I got for this video. Those are my defensive ends, free agents, and upcoming draft selections that the Seahawks should consider keeping their eyes on. And look, it is within the realm of possibility that we roll into 2023 with Shelby Harris, Poona Ford, with Quentin Jefferson as the primary backup. And then you just need to bring in another depth piece. It's cool, but even then, Shelby Harris getting up there in age, Quentin Jefferson doesn't have much of a ceiling. Poona Ford, I have no idea if he's going to be able to pull this off or not. He's definitely not a typical 3-4 end if you look at the way he plays and you look at how his size. But if any of that stuff falls through, or if you're trying to plan long-term beyond having Shelby Harris, then you got to address this area of the team, and you may have to do so aggressively. You need a good defensive line in that 3-4 to absorb the blockers so your linebackers can do what they need to do. Speaking of linebackers, that is going to be the central topic of our video tomorrow morning. Hope to see you guys there. And let me know what you guys think about this crew. Let me know if you think I missed anybody. Let me know if you think I should just not even pay attention to a certain guy because he's not going to fit. It doesn't make sense. So let me know what you guys think about all this. That's my look at defensive ends. See you guys later today in stream, probably. And go Hawks.